Shots have been fired.
It's all people can talk about, man.
Disney and Sony can't agree on shared custody for Spider-Man, so Mommy and Daddy are splitting up.
It's over.
No.
Once the story went public, Sony wasted little time in issuing its response and, surprise, surprise, they are placing the blame on Disney.
The news was and remains a huge deal.
Sony's stock price actually took a pretty significant dip yesterday, and that was attributed to a lot of the negativity from fans online.
So Sony has replaced Thanos as the primary villain of the MCU? How does Sony not understand that they just can't erase everything that has happened in Endgame? What, do they think they're Thanos now? Snap and you can just erase Spidey from existence and everything he's been through with Tony? Nope, save Spider-Man. Tony Stark didn't die to save Peter Parker for Sony to take him out of the MCU. Save Spider-Man. People seem to be mad at Sony for Spider-Man and the MCU separating. If you read the Deadline piece, it sounds like Disney raised its price from 5% to 50%, which is a lot. It's not insane Sony didn't agree to that. It all sums up to money and greed. I mean, did Disney really think that Sony would let them share 50-50 in revenue? 10-90 max, maybe. It just became their highest grossing movie of all time. With Venom and Into the Spider-Verse proceeds, it's their goldmine now.
Now there's a new report claiming that those numbers are fake, and what Disney was actually asking for was a 30% stake in future Spider-Man movies. They're not asking for 30% of the profits, they're asking for the right to pay for 30% of the production, but then by becoming a 30% partner, they would wind up making a lot more money in the long term. That was the deal that caused Sony to walk away from the table. Like, they didn't even try to counter.
I respectfully request that you return to the negotiating table and make a deal that will please us, the fans. Since Sony and Disney, the parent company of Marvel Studios, were unable to renegotiate the terms of their original 2015 deal that saw Marvel producing Spider-Man movies with Sony retaining ownership, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, potentially for good. No! Just stop it, please. Sony Pictures, give Disney what they want, and many millions of us will keep giving you our money. Though Disney apparently did try to keep Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU, Sony pulled him into its web in the end.
And the entire internet freaked out.
Things went from bad to worse when Sony issued its response to the deal's apparent collapse. A company spokesperson stated,
"Much of today's news about Spider-Man has mischaracterized recent discussions about Kevin Feige's involvement in the franchise," says a Sony spokesperson. "We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision not to have him continue as a lead producer of our next live-action Spider-Man film. We hope this might change in the future, but understand that the many new responsibilities that Disney has given him, including all their newly added Marvel properties, do not allow time for him to work on IP they do not own," says the statement. "Kevin is terrific, and we are grateful for his help and guidance and appreciate the path he has helped put us on, which we will continue."
After Sony produced films like 2007's Spider-Man 3 and 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2 failed to truly capture the essence of the web-slinger, and in light of just how popular and successful Spider-Man has been in the MCU, fans have been quick to denounce the decision.
They revealed recently that Kevin Feige secretly was helping them make all their other Spider-Man movies of any kind without any credit, without his name being anywhere on the movies, going back to Andrew Garfield-era Amazing Spider-Man films. Even before that, he had a lower producer credit on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. Before Marvel Studios really became Marvel Studios, he was working under a Via Rod when they were originally making those early Spider-Man films. So that means that Kevin Feige also helped make the Venom movie, they just didn't put his name anywhere on the film. So this is Sony doing major damage control because their stock slid just a little bit. So of course their CEO, the president, came out and said something like, look, people are taking this the wrong way. That's not exactly what's going on here. But in that statement, when they editorialize about Kevin Feige being way too busy to work on their films, which is kind of laughable, they're also saying that if there were Spider-Man films that you didn't like or you thought were bad, that Kevin Feige also helped on those too. So he's partially to blame if there are things that you don't like about previous Spider-Man films. But for those of you that are asking, why doesn't Disney make this problem go away by just buying Sony Pictures by the studio? The reasons why Disney can't do that should be pretty obvious. They'd become a legit monopoly if you weren't already worried about them becoming a monopoly. Additionally, adding all the Sony stuff on top of the Fox stuff would definitely make them a monopoly. The government would probably never approve the deal, And Disney just spent almost $100 billion buying Fox's assets, so there's no way that they would turn right around in the next couple of years and do the exact same thing with another studio. But the good news is that the rights to Spider-Man would revert back to Marvel if Sony did sell their studio to someone else, or if they stopped making Spider-Man films, but they're never going to stop making Spider-Man films. They make way too much money on those. Further complicating things is all the other non-movie Spider-Man projects going on, the TV shows and the video games. You're a big fan of Marvel's Spider-Man game, one of the best games of all time, not just Spider-Man games, but one of the best video games of all time. Sony just bought Insomniac Games, the makers of Marvel's Spider-Man franchise. Right now they're working on a sequel to that. Based on the post-credit scene, it's probably going to revolve around the Harry Osborn version of Venom and Norman Osborn. Marvel actually owns the rights to the Spider-Man video games, so even though Sony bought the game studio that made that game, they still don't own the rights to the Spider-Man video games. They'll make a lot of money on whatever the sequel is, but most of it will go back to Marvel and Disney. You may have heard about all the live-action Spider-Verse TV shows that Sony is developing with Lord & Miller. Remember, Marvel owns the TV rights to Spider-Man, meaning that Sony has to get a contract with Marvel to do all that stuff on the side. So just because the movie deal seems like it's melting down around us doesn't mean that Sony and Marvel have problems working together on everything Spider-Man related. As the press release says, it's really more about the creative control and the right to produce what the story, who the actors are, how they make the movies for the Spider-Man solo films. It's not so much about having Spider-Man in the MCU. So your number one question, what is the future of the Spider-Man character in the movies right now? Well, as of right now, per Sony's statement, they're planning on 2 more Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. They definitely plan on crossing him over with Venom. We've all talked about that. Kevin Feige has confirmed it. They talked about live-action Spider-Verse. But the other thing that might happen now is that you might actually see Spider-Man in a rated R film, because reports about the deal say that the reason why the Venom movie was originally supposed to be rated R, but then at the last minute they turned it into a PG-13 cut, was because they wanted to cross Spider-Man over with Venom, and they wanted Venom to be able to cross over into the MCU. But they were worried that if they made Venom rated R, it would cause a lot of problems for that, because the MCU movies will always be PG-13. Deadpool is kind of the exception to that now with Fox, but a lot of this was all done before the Fox-Marvel deal went down. I think Spider-Man solo films are always going to be PG-13 because he's so popular with younger audiences, they want them to be able to go see the movie. What'll probably happen, though, is they try to put him in a rated R movie. That would be your Venom versus Carnage film or Maximum Carnage. Like doing a legit rated R version of Carnage, and then Spider-Man is in it teaming up with Venom to stop him. Whatever you thought of the Venom movie, I definitely think we would prefer a rated R version of Carnage. Right now, Sony has plans to release Spider-Man 3 summer 2021, so that'd still be during Marvel Phase 4. So Disney and Sony have 2 years to come back to the table to work out a new sharing arrangement. There's still a chance they could save this and Spider-Man won't be out of the MCU completely, but for now, at least for the next 6 months or so, it seems like Kevin Feige won't have any kind of creative input as to what happens with Spider-Man 3.
But what does Spider-Man leaving the MCU mean for actor Tom Holland? Well, the good news is that even though it's not the MCU, Sony does have their own fictional universe with a much less catchy name, Sony's Marvel Universe. In fact, Tom was even supposed to make a cameo in their flick Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and was heartbroken when it didn't work out. Sony is already planning more films about famous Spider-Man characters Kraven the Hunter and Morbius the Living Vampire. It's possible Tom Holland will show up in these movies or in sequels to Venom and Into the Spider-Verse. But obviously these movies won't take place in the MCU unless Sony and Disney manage to come to an agreement at some point in the future. But really, leaving the MCU might be a blessing in disguise for Tom Holland. According to Tom, he's always looking out for his next big break and hopes to become a legendary actor in league with folks like Jake Gyllenhaal, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Meryl Streep. And if that's his goal, he's definitely going about it the right way because this star has some hefty projects coming up. These include appearing in the film adaptation of the book series Chaos Walking and in the adaptation of the Uncharted video game series. He's also the lead in Spies in Disguise along with Will Smith and will be lending his voice to The Voyage of Dr. Dolittle with Robert Downey Jr. From horror movies like The Devil All the Time to the animated Pixar movie Onward, it definitely seems like Tom isn't afraid to diversify his acting resume. But appearing in front of the camera is only part of this star's long-term plan. According to Tom, his 20-year goal is to start directing movies instead of starring in them. He claims he isn't opposed to appearing in more franchises in addition to his time as Spider-Man. As far as iconic characters he'd love to portray, he counts James Bond and Batman among them. Wow, leave some roles for the rest of Hollywood. Interestingly enough, when Far From Home hit the record for Sony's highest-grossing film, it surpassed the James Bond movie Skyfall. Maybe if Tom gets to play his dream role, a Bond movie will again be in the #1 spot for Sony. While the future definitely looks bright for this star, Tom does admit that he worries his time as Peter Parker might come back to haunt him. You know that super expensive, immaculately fitted supersuit he wears? Yeah, that thing even has its own security guard. To make sure it fit just right, Tom had to have his body scanned and then 3D images were made of it. This also allowed movie makers to create CGI versions of Tom that's so lifelike even Tom admits to being fooled by it. In fact, he sometimes worries his image will be used to portray Spider-Man even if he isn't personally involved. But while he definitely has things to worry about, Tom knows how to stay grounded. One of the benefits of being famous is that he's always surrounded by people willing to tell him how great he is. That does sound nice, but Tom prefers not to live in an echo chamber and credits his father Dominic with keeping him down to earth. His father is a comedian and author, and Tom says seeing how hard his father has worked in his own career has inspired him to push himself and work as hard as possible. Even if he's not playing the role of a superhero anymore, Tom is still determined to be a hero in real life. He and his younger brothers, Sam, Harry, and Patrick, sponsor the Brothers Trust, a charity organized by their parents. The organization capitalizes on Tom's fame and uses it to draw attention and funds to lesser-known charities. Some of these include the Lunch Bowl Network, which helps provide hot meals for children in Kenya, and Storybook Dads, which helps parents in prison record stories and messages for their children. While Tom Holland may not be swinging through the streets of New York City for the rest of his career, it doesn't mean this star doesn't have sky-high aspirations. From mainstream roles like that of Ian Lightfoot to more indie parts, it seems like Tom wants to do a little bit of everything, and he wants to be the best at it. While this Sony-Disney debacle is big news now, we have no doubt we will someday look back on it as a blip where Tom's long and successful Hollywood career is concerned. He wants to win an Oscar within 15 years and make his directorial debut within 20, and we wouldn't be surprised if he does both even sooner than he hopes.
I'm really mad that the Avengers keep meeting up without me.
That's all the information I could gather about this whole situation, or debacle, or however you want to call it, about the MCU and all of that. I just put it all in one video instead of like talking about it, so then you guys could check it out, the videos yourselves from those channels, to see like any info if I missed anything or whatever. But I just put it in one video so you could digest it one quick simple watch instead of going all around trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Please like, comment down below, and subscribe if you want to see more content, and I'll see you guys later.